save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.
Hi, I'm Tony Lyons. Welcome to the MAHA Revolution. As most of you know, we've been getting 3,500 to 4,000 people on this show, and we've been then following up with a detailed email that gives people assets that they can send out to their platforms. We also have a lot of people from the mainstream media who are coming on and quoting things people say, so bear that in mind. Part of the reason that we're here is to tell the true story, straighten out the story that the mainstream media isn't covering well. So it's good that they're on here. We want them to quote people, and we want you to all recognize that they're here and that they have been quoting people. So, one of the things that I just wanted to say quickly is that, many of the people who are speaking out now, some of them who disagree with things that Secretary Kennedy does or that Dr. Oz does or says, those are people who have been activists for many, many years, and they're used to disagreeing with people in positions of power. And that's a good thing. That's a healthy thing. That's good for any movement, to have real disagreement, to have real dialogue. That's what we've hoped for all these years, is that we want to have a really rich dialogue in this country where people disagree, but people come together and they have certain shared values where we're really trying to make the country healthier. But that doesn't require people to fall in line or to obey. So I think that's good to keep in mind, that we can disagree and that can make us stronger. So a couple of quick notes. Jenny McCarthy was going to come on this call, but she couldn't make it because she had surgery. She's doing fine. She's going to take a couple of weeks to heal, and then she's going to come on after that. So let's just move right into the incredible lineup of people who we have today. The first person is Dr. Oz, who has, of course, been at the center of the MAHA movement for the entire time, and is just a great spokesperson and a great fighter for all the things that we care about. Thanks so much, Dr. Oz, and welcome.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. There's a lot of stuff to be going on. I didn't want to talk about the medication pricing last week because I knew it was a sensitive topic, and of course it was top secret. But since the announcement yesterday, now I can talk more openly about why we decided to take this approach with the secretary. And I do believe it's firmly within the MAHA movement's desire, because the MAHA movement, to me, and I've said this before, is about being curious about things you can do to make a difference and asking tough questions. And if you're thoughtful about it, and you truly are curious, not just as often is the case, asking questions that are half-hearted or basically statements in the skies, then you start to get some answers that are uncomfortable. So here's one of the questions we were asking. Why is it that 1/3 of Americans, when they go to the drugstore, cannot fulfill their prescriptions because they can't afford it? They leave with sticker shock. Why is it that many Americans are forced to decide between groceries and their medications? In a country that has the most innovative healthcare system in the world, with the best drugs that are ever made, period, in the history of humanity, how is it possible that those drugs cost 3 times more in this country than they cost overseas? You put those all together, what you should feel is if you happen to have a medical problem that requires a medication, you're unable to get it because we've priced drugs in America unfairly higher than they are in other countries, which is why people in those countries can actually afford to take medications if they need them. Now, there's the whole issue of MAHA, of course, of do you ever need to take the medications? And a lot of folks would make the argument, I think there's some accuracy to this, that if you live a really healthy lifestyle, you don't need medications too often. Without question, I believe that we overuse medications for chronic illnesses that are better addressed with lifestyle changes. But there are also times when you are born with a genetic weakness, or you're in an environment where, for whatever reason, you've developed a chronic illness where there are medications that can be helpful. Sometimes you get bad diseases. Cancer is a good example, where we have medications that are dramatically improved in the last 15, 20 years, where people usually have their life saved here, when in other parts of the world, that's not what happens. And so with that in mind, we want to make sure that innovation remains present. At the same time, we got to deal with the problem I started off with, which you can't afford the drugs. So the president asked Secretary Kennedy and myself, I'm at Medicare and Medicaid, so I deal with drug prices, asked us to get aggressive on trying to figure out how we can get most favored nation pricing, which means the exact same price that you're selling drugs for overseas needs to be available to Americans. And that needs to especially be true for our most vulnerable Medicaid patients. So we went out and started negotiating hard with companies. And the company that many of you have heard of, Pfizer, which plays a market leading role, which means that what they do might be copied by a lot of other companies, was the first to come in and after a lot of very difficult negotiation, agree to give up a lot of money in order to allow the American people to get most favored nation pricing for Medicaid patients, for us to get most favored nation pricing on all new drugs that are released by that company, to get most favored nation pricing on several of their most popular medications. I mean, across the board, we got the things that the president demanded that we get. And in return, they're being better corporate citizens. And many of you scoff at that because you're angry that they're involved in making the COVID vaccine. But our goal here wasn't to penalize a company or applaud a company. Our goal here was to get most favored drug pricing from every company for the American people. And so if we're going to do that, you're going to have to deal with all the companies, whether you like them or not, and you got to get them to come in and do something that's better than they've done in the past. And the pitch that I made to these CEOs, and I've got a great team here led by Chris Klump and John Brooks, Inma Hernandez, these folks went to the wall to try to get this done, was to emphasize to these CEOs that you're in the health business by definition. So you need to actually care about the health of individuals enough that you might actually care about the price that these individuals have to pay to get your medication. So we got to do both. We got to preserve your ability to be profitable enough to innovate and create new solutions to horrible diseases that plague mankind. At the same time, you got to be able to give us pricing that does not bankrupt the American people. And we did that yesterday, which is why the president embraced this and endorsed this, and Secretary Kennedy was laudatory. In fact, Secretary Kennedy shared that one of his kids to whom he had spoken about this at the last seconds because it was all embargoed. We weren't able to and shouldn't and didn't want to talk about this to anybody outside of the core group until we announced it publicly. But Bobby said his son is a Democrat. And when he heard about this, he thanked them for doing the right thing for the American people. So I know there's frustration around why we have to work with Pharma at all. I've tried to address that. Frustration about this company in particular. I actually personally feel that your sentiments and everyone's sentiments about COVID vary from the vaccine should never have been made to there should have been mandates to get the vaccine to we should have stopped pushing these things years ago. That may all be true, but certainly in February of 2020, most people in the country didn't think there would be any option for a vaccine that calendar year. And the president pushed hard and was through Operation Warp Speed able to get it done. So I think that's a strong positive that America is able to do things like that, even if long term we don't think the results were what we desired. So I'm hoping that opened up a bit of an opportunity to talk more about this. I strongly endorse what Tony said earlier, where if you're a family, you're going to fight. Families who don't fight, it's hard to stay healthy because you don't work out issues. And as a surgeon, I'll speak to the fact that if there's an abscess or an infection and you don't lance it and open it up and shine light on it, give it some oxygen so that you can fight against the infection. It just festers as a deep abscess and a boil and eventually can kill you. So you're much better off exposing it to light, metaphorically, in our case, talking about it. So that's high level. One last thing I'll point out is we are experiencing a shutdown here in Washington. I'm hoping this is short-lived. It's painful because you've got to deal with programs that are important for the American people that we've got to make some difficult choices on. I'm hoping it's an eye-opening experience for a lot of Americans because we live in a republic where even the rational thing to do is sometimes disagreed with. But I'm hoping this works itself out pretty quickly and we can move on with a lot of the big things that the MAHA movement's already able to achieve in Washington under this president, under this secretary. Back to you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks so much. And, I just want to say that I feel really grateful to Dr. Oz and to Secretary Kennedy and really your whole team for the sweeping changes, reforms, bold, decisive actions, really on a massive scale with just hundreds and hundreds of actions taking place. And so, they don't get covered in the New York Times or, in almost any of the mainstream media. But these things are happening, and they're happening, like I said, on this great scale. And, what the New York Times tells us is that Bobby Kennedy, Dr. Oz, Callie Mean, so many of the people who are here are a threat to public health, that they're dangerous. And I think we all know that they're a threat to a corrupt way of doing business that has made Americans the sickest people on the planet, while we spend 3 times the amount of money on healthcare that anybody else spends. So what we're all about is rebuilding trust, rebuilding a focus on people over profits. And so one of the people who's been really focused on that is one of our new medical advisors. His name is Dr. Asim Malhotra. He's a cardiologist. He's been advocating for MAHA issues for over a decade. He really wants people to be heart healthy and reduce the intake of prescription drugs, sugars, carbs, all that kind of thing in their diet. He was a really important player in the whole COVID-19 pandemic era, and has since been around the world and working around the clock to make Britain healthy and also to make the United States healthier. So he's got 800,000 followers. He's a great guy, and we're happy to have him on. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. And really proud to be part of this movement with everybody here. So I'm going to just summarize where we are up to really in terms of issues on the movement for greater transparency, but also how do we restore trust. 3 weeks ago, I was asked to speak at the Reform UK Party conference in Birmingham in the United Kingdom, which the Reform Party, if people are not aware, are an opposition party to the current Labour government and are currently in the opinion polls leading by a large margin, that if there was a general election tomorrow, they would win hands down. But there's still 4 years to the election. They asked me to speak in relation to some of the work I've been doing with MAHA Action and to update them on what's going on in the US. But the title of my talk was How to Make Britain Healthy Again. And I started off, I'm just going to summarize because it's very relevant to the big picture issue and how we move forward. So I started off actually quoting, Stephen Hawking. I said that evil is rooted in ignorance, but what's worse than ignorance is the illusion of knowledge. And I referenced John Ioannidis, who I call the Stephen Hawking of medicine. As many of you know, he's professor of medicine at Stanford. And this is a really important sort of large picture statistic people need to fully appreciate across the board, is that 20 to 50% of all healthcare activity in the United States brings no benefit to the patient, is harmful or wasteful. And the reason for that is really because most of the published literature in medical research is poor quality. But the reason the problem persists is that most doctors don't know that. So medical knowledge is under commercial control, but most doctors don't know that. So that's really the major issue at the heart of the problem. Now, how do we bring that forward to help us explain the current situation we're in with the COVID pandemic? And I started off really explaining that, and I think this is one of the best moves that the Trump administration, and in particular Secretary Kennedy, has done, is to ban the use of mRNA technology in vaccines. $500 million worth, which became a big news story here in the UK. And I explained some of the reasoning behind that. So as a doctor, with every intervention you do, you ask yourself 2 questions. How much difference does it make? And how do I know this? So if you look at the COVID vaccine, and I always cite evidence which is best available evidence, and it's free from commercial influence as possible. And just to summarize what I said there to help them explain why did Secretary Kennedy intervene in this way, and something I've had discussions with him on a regular basis. He read my paper, which I published in 2022 in the Journal of Interresistance on this. But up-to-date evidence shows us that independently analyzed from the very beginning, the mRNA Pfizer vaccine was 2 to 4 times more likely to cause serious harm than it was to prevent hospitalization from COVID. Okay, and that rate of serious harm was about 1 in 800. Now, the only country in the world to look at the benefits of the COVID vaccine in real-world data and certainly publish it, as far as we know, is the United Kingdom. In 2024, if you're in the highest risk group, if you're over 90, you had to vaccinate 7,000 people over 90, 7,000 to prevent 1 severe hospitalization with COVID, versus a serious harm rate of at least 1 in 800 at 2 months. And that protection of 1 in 7,000 lasts about 6 months, okay? So it's very clear, anybody who looks at it dispassionately, the harms outweigh the benefits right now. The second point I made was also up to date, quoting Stephen Hatfield, who's many of you, if you don't know him, He's one of the chief medical officers within HHS. And when he gave an interview to Steve Bannon, he made it clear that all of the published research that they had analyzed, hundreds of studies showing the mRNA vaccine is harmful. It was a no-brainer to really stop the use of this technology in the future. And one of the things he said is that it's also interfering with tumor suppressor genes. Now, we don't know if it's completely causal, but there is certainly a concern that this may be causing cancer. Now, at that point, I intervened because I was asked by Britain's most eminent oncologist, Angus Dalgleish, 500 peer-reviewed publications, written textbooks on vaccine development, on immunology. He's been involved in vaccine development. He was behind discovering CD4 cells being involved in HIV and AIDS. Very eminent guy. He asked me specifically to say at the conference that, in his opinion, there is a likely link between the COVID mRNA vaccines and cancers amongst members of the royal family. Now, it's an observation, but listen, anyone observing 4 members of a royal family within 2 years getting cancer, different age groups, it's obvious that some kind of exposure has happened. Now, we've got plausible mechanism for the COVID vaccine, so I mentioned that. Now, this is where it's interesting to see the backlash that occurred, where, it literally within hours, newspaper articles, the Prime Minister got involved in Parliament a few days later, named me, and used the word dangerous extremism, misrepresented what I'd said. He suggested that I had suggested all vaccines are linked to cancer when I'd never suggested such a thing. And the media amplified that message. In fact, the New York Times, there was all these articles that were misrepresenting what I'd said. Now, in one sense, it's a compliment because we're over the target. If the Prime Minister is attacking us, right, a Labour left-wing Prime Minister that has been partly behind in many ways supporting, promoting the COVID vaccines, you can imagine they're going to double down, but they're making errors in their process. And one of the rules of public health advocacy, and why I take it as a compliment, is as soon as your work threatens an industry or an ideological cabal, you will be attacked, sometimes unrelentingly and viciously. And we've seen that happen to Cali Means, we've seen it happen to Secretary Kennedy, we've seen it happen to President Trump, right? So this is what we're up against, but we have to stay firm and we have to stick to the evidence and come to ethics. And this is my final point. We've got a crisis of trust, massive crisis of trust. In the United States, trust was at an all-time high in doctors in April 2020 at about 72%. There's a publication in JAMA on this. By April 2024, it's gone to pretty much an all-time low, just over 40%. Why is that? This is not opinion. What does the evidence tell us? In 2022, in BMJ Global Health, there was a publication done by Kevin Bardosh and colleagues, which was a very extensive publication looking at what was driving decreased trust in institutions, in medical bodies, but also linked to this, and this is something that Secretary Kennedy gets falsely accused of, why has there been a decreased uptake in the last few years in other vaccines, in other traditional childhood vaccines? Now, all vaccines are not the same. We can all agree on that. Some are definitely more essential than others, and that's another discussion. But what was driving the decreased trust? They concluded the COVID vaccine mandates, the coercion, those policies were behind decreasing trust. And also, what's interesting is when doctors talk about negative aspects of vaccines, it maintains trust and stops the fueling of conspiracy theories and alternative explanations. Exactly what we are doing. So this is about transparency. So what is the way forward? What are the solutions? We are taught as doctors, we're not very good at this, let's be honest, okay? As doctors, we're not very good at this. When it comes to medical mistakes, the way to sustain trust and reduce anger and reduce blame is to admit the mistake and to say, we got this wrong, we apologize, we are sorry, we're going to do things to stop this happening again. Now, as far as I've seen across the whole world, whether it's the UK or the USA, other countries of the world, there has not been a mea culpa, right? Whatever people agree or disagree about the COVID vaccine, I think everybody can agree now that mandates were wrong, and congratulate Joseph Ladapo in Florida for removing mandates altogether. Because when you mandate a medical product, it's obvious people are going to be distrustful. Okay, so that's something that absolutely needs to go and needs to be discussed more in the US. But moving forward to restore trust, we need a mea culpa. We need an apology to the vaccine injured. We need an apology for the mandates. Patients are very forgiving, even if you make a mistake, if they think your intentions were pure and you own up to it. So that's where we need to go moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much. one of the things that I want to point out is that there's such a diversity of people on this call and also in the MAHA movement. So, many of the people who are part of the MAHA movement, they care about specific products. So those products could be food, could be pesticides, could be vaccines, could be drugs, could be literally anything. And many of these things are, or most of them really are, delivery mechanisms for toxins. And the question is, how do we lower the toxic load on all the people in this country to then try to lower the rates of chronic disease? So that's what we're really trying to do. And we're trying to give voice to all of the different sides of this revolution. So the next person who we have is Dr. Ben Carson. And Dr. Carson is a neurosurgeon, former Republican presidential candidate. He served as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during the first Trump term. He's been an important voice in bringing better health care to all kinds of underserved communities, and really just a great and powerful voice for a very long time. We're thrilled to have him here. Thanks so much and welcome.
Well, thank you. I was delighted to be here and meet most of you virtually. I appreciate the hard work that's been done. And, healthcare has been something that's been part of my DNA since I was a little kid. I loved anything that had to do with medicine. And I was particularly interested in missionary doctors because of the kinds of diseases that they encountered. Many of which were environmental in nature. And I've been thinking for a long time, the MAHA movement sort of encapsulates what I've been saying for decades, and that is, if everybody ate 3 well-balanced, nutritious meals a day, drank 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, got appropriate rest, exercised, and didn't put harmful things in their bodies, most of us in medicine would be out of a job. Having said that, it's a very good career because people aren't going to do it. But we need to be pushing that narrative, helping people to understand what's going on. And I think we have a very good chance of doing that because the level of interest is very high right now. And some of you probably remember about 3 weeks ago, the Kellogg Company said that they were going to modify the artificial colorings of cereals. They've come to the table voluntarily. A lot of other food companies have done that as well. And food distributors. Today, Walmart indicated that they would be looking at fat substitutes and preservatives and synthetic dyes and artificial sweeteners, and favoring the foods that went along with the accepted recommendations for removing or altering those in a way that will be helpful to our entire society. But also recognize when we're talking about health, most people are just thinking about, yeah, we get the appropriate nutrition, we'll build up our muscles, we'll be stronger, we'll have more endurance, all of which is true. But when we talk about health, we need to talk about all components of health, physical, mental, and spiritual. If you really want to be truly healthy, you have to address all of those things. And as an example, if you're all sitting in a room and suddenly a hungry tiger comes in the room, he doesn't touch anybody, but what happens to you? Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your pupils start to dilate, your bladder starts to contract, all kind of things start happening. The tiger hasn't touched you. Now, can you imagine somebody who's anxious all the time, who has all of that going on a constant basis? What does that do to the body? And, the spiritual aspects of who we are. When I was a teenager, I had a really red hot temper. Most people know me now, just can't believe that. But, I tried to kill somebody. And fortunately, the good Lord spared me by having them have a big metal belt buckle on, and a knife struck that instead. But through that whole experience, I learned that the reason I was angry so much is because I was selfish. It was me, my, and I. I want this, somebody did this to me, all this kind of stuff. And I learned to take myself out of the center of the equation, out of the middle of the circle, and let somebody else be there. And it completely took care of that problem. Takes care of it now. Virtually nobody can make me mad, except my wife. So it really I think contributes to your calmness, and that is a major component of health. And I think we really need to talk about all components of what makes a person truly healthy. And I look forward to interacting with this group for that purpose.
Thanks so much for all of that. That's a great point that people really can change. People can change dramatically. And, some of the ways that we're really concerned with people changing is changing from an unhealthy life and an unhealthy lifestyle to having a more healthy life. And like you said, that's in all different ways, spiritually, physically, with the intake of whatever products you put in your body or in your environment. So, that's a great point, and it's so important. And, to a great extent, what we want to do is keep the government out of our lives. And, the government has kind of failed the American public. And now what we need is innovation, competition, to get rid of corruption. And we need the government just to give us really good information, give us radical transparency, give us real science, not, corporate corrupt science. And that's what I think is starting to happen now. And that's why I'm so optimistic for what's going to happen next. And one of the people who's really been at the center of the whole MAHA movement and really pushing the world towards eating healthier food and putting healthier things into their body or on their body is Vani Hari. She's known as the Food Babe. She's a real activist, best-selling author, and she's been fighting for transparency in the food business and really exposing the harmful ingredients, the harmful practices, and pushing for healthy, organic alternatives for many, many years, and has been in the middle of getting all kinds of companies to voluntarily change their products and the things that they deliver to the public. And it's really just done a spectacular job.
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. I lost the last bit of that, Tony, but thank you for the introduction. And Dr. Ben Carson, thank you for your words and welcome to the team. I'm excited to get to know you more and to hear your wisdom as we continue this fight for getting our food system cleaned up and our bodies clean. One thing I want to talk about is I don't talk about pharmaceuticals often. I stay in my lane of food, but this Tylenol announcement last week from just me as a mother and me as a person who has tried to heal their body from being on a lot of pharmaceutical drugs. If you don't know my story, I was on 9 prescription drugs in my early 20s, had 2 abdominal surgeries, and the medical system failed me. They did not tell me the reason why I was feeling the way that I felt, which was the food that I was eating. And instead, they medicated me and cut me open. And thankfully, along the way, I've had some amazing teachers and healers to help me break free from the problems of the medical system today and how we don't look at the root cause of what we're doing. And in one in particular instance that I have to share is when I was in college, when I was experiencing a lot of these issues, there was a technical writing professor, and you had to pass this course in order to pass the College of Engineering and get your degree. And he had us rewrite the warning label on a Tylenol bottle over and over and over again. It was a multi-week process. Back then, the Tylenol warning label had all capital. It was really hard to read. And because he ingrained in us what that warning label was telling us in terms of consuming that product, I just chose never to take Tylenol again from that moment. And that was 26 years ago. And when I started deciding to have a family and started to read about how to take care of my children, I picked up this book, Nourishing Traditions, which many of the people who believe in natural therapies and stuff I know have read, and I think is required reading for any new mother. And in there, in the back, they talk about all of the things that are, presented to heal a child through the first years of life. And, Tylenol was discussed in that. And I remember, this is not something you just give willy-nilly to your child or take during pregnancy. And so luckily, I was, given this information because of my own ability to research and read. And then I'm reading, this book just came out, Common Sense Child Rearing by Tom Cowan, who was the co-author of that book, Nourishing Traditions, so many years ago that I read. And in this book that just came out at the beginning of this year, there's an entire appendix labeled Tylenol in here, warning mothers about this. And I think the reason why I want to share this is because this information has been hidden from us for so long, has never been talked about at the national level, has never been discussed by the President of the United States or the head of any agency within our government. And it's a new era. And I was so thrilled to see this conversation take hold last week as a mother, as a fighter in this movement, as someone who wants the truth to come out and how we can solve the root cause of why we are so sick. And anyways, I just wanted to share that little tidbit of how I feel about what's been going on, because it's been really deeply meaningful to me in my journey. Just today, as Dr. Ben Carson mentioned, the largest grocery chain in America, the largest retailer, and their store brand announced that they're removing artificial food dyes and 30 other different processed ingredients from their store brand. Just to give you an idea of how big of an impact this is Kellogg's was a $2.7 billion brand. Walmart Great Value is a $27 billion category under their company. So this is massive. This is going to force, obviously, the entire food industry to start to make these changes if they haven't already made the commitment, which over 50% of food companies have already made the commitment to remove artificial food dyes, but now is pushing the envelope even further on some of these other chemicals that are very problematic, that the FDA, I know, is starting to review the post-market review and scientific studies for, and looking at, whether those chemicals should be allowed for use in America. But the industry is moving faster than even our government can move because of the leadership we've had at HHS. And ingredients like titanium dioxide that have been banned in Europe because of DNA damage, that you found in Skittles and donuts and Sour Patch Kids and other things here in the United States, are now being removed voluntarily by these large corporations like Walmart. You have azodicarbonamide, a chemical I got out of Subway bread that you find in yoga mat and shoe rubber, that you get fined $450,000 if you get caught using it in Singapore, and it's been banned all over the globe. China, India, so many countries ban this chemical in bread. But Walmart has said no more. We're not going to serve this anymore as part of our portfolio. And there's several other chemicals that they announced, and so this is huge. This is I think one of the biggest announcements we've had to date. We have the company Mondelez that came out with an announcement that they're going to be removing artificial food dyes in their food line, which, if anybody's seen the orange Oreos that come out this time of year, that's going to change. It's going to be the Swedish fish. They make Sour Patch Kids. So all of those things are going to change, which is incredible for our children. I got an interesting question today. I was doing a pre-interview call for a event I'm doing next week in DC, and if you guys are there, it's the Hill next. I think it's called the Health Summit, It's at the Mayflower Hotel on Tuesday next week on October 7th. And there's some great, amazing MAHA speakers going to be there. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya is going to be there, and Senator Marshall, who's a big MAHA proponent, and others. If you can come, we would love your support just to be in the audience. But, you know, I was talking to this person and they said, you know, why is it going to take so long for these changes to the food industry? Why is it going to take 1 to 2 years to make some of these changes? Why can't we have it tomorrow? And, you know, before I had a food company, before I knew about the food industry and how it worked, I also had that same question. And I was like, wait a minute, these companies already make these better, safer products overseas. They already have the formulations. They should be doing it tomorrow in America, right? We shouldn't stand for it anymore. But unfortunately, you know, we're dealing with large, giant, bureaucratic food companies. And just to give you an example, you know, Doritos itself and PepsiCo that uses yellow 5 and yellow 6 is a $5 billion business within PepsiCo. And in order to have enough beets and carrots and other things that are natural, in order to support that type of business in America, where Doritos is being sold at every gas station, it's in restaurants, it's in, you know, vending machines, it's in every grocery store, it's in stores that you don't even buy food from, like Michael's and Lowe's and Home Depot. It's everywhere, right? And in order to have that change, more carrots are going to have to be grown in this country. More beets are going to have to be grown. You know, all of the different natural resources that we need to make those natural dyes need to start making its way into the supply chain. So that's going to take time, and that's a positive change. And so when I also hear this argument, oh, removing artificial food dyes is not going to make America healthy again. Damn right it will be. It's going to make the people who didn't know they didn't need to be on ADHD medication because of the dyes that are in their food. It's going to help our farmland have more diversified crops. It's going to remove the petroleum cancer risk from so many different products that are in 70% of products on today's shelves. So, you know, this is a small change, but it's also one that was really hard to do until now, until we had this moment. And, you know, there was an incredible investigation that, and I should wrap up soon. I have a lot to talk about, but there was I'll leave with this. There was an incredible investigation in the Capital Research Center that showed the amount of billions of dollars the big food and chemical corporations are spending in Washington to prevent these changes. And I'll give you some examples. Coca-Cola spent, you know, $4 million in 2024 to maintain high fructose corn syrup subsidies. And you think about, you know, the recent announcement they made about, you know, going to cane sugar. You have McDonald's and the National Restaurant Association spending, you know, $2.5 billion on labeling against nutrition reforms. You have Bayer, Monsanto spending $8 million against, you know, any kind of lobbying to defend atrazine and glyphosate. You know, so this is the type, I mean, Nestle spending $1 million, Kraft spending $1 million, CropLife America spending almost $2 million, American Beverage Association spending another $2 billion. So this is the what we're up against. And the American Beverage Association is really, you know, Pepsi and Coke, and Pepsi owns Frito-Lay, which owns all of those products that have artificial dye, like Cheetos and Doritos. So, you know, it's David versus Goliath in this. And so one of the things that I think is just so important to leave with here is we are winning. We are winning this game, and we are making change faster than ever. And it's a revolution. And it's just so exciting to be part of this movement with you guys. And thank you again for this opportunity to speak today, Tony. And let's keep going.
Thanks so much, Vonnie. It's, you know, there really is so much good that's happening, and you've been right at the center of it, fighting so hard for so long, and we're all really, really grateful. You know, it's fascinating that you can read in the New York Times just day after day about how little is happening and how the few things that are happening are actually bad for public health. That what we really need is, you know, more food dyes, more Tylenol, more pesticides, more drugs. It's just sort of insane that there can't be any focus on the incredible progress that's being made. And that, as Bobby Kennedy has said so many times, you know, can't we all just, begin to love our children more than we hate each other, and really just look at what's actually happening and not just make it all partisan politics. So one of the people who's just been an incredibly strong and dynamic MAHA voice is Callie Means. For those who don't know, he's been on a mission to steer our healthcare focus towards incentivizing metabolic health and to really get at the root cause of illness and disease. His incredible New York Times bestselling book, Good Energy, really goes into all of that and talks about the corruption of the food system and how we can drastically improve all of our lives by changing our diet. So, one thing that we should also credit him for is that he and Charlie Kirk and 2 or 3 other people were kind of right at the center of connecting Bobby Kennedy to President Trump, and having that whole kind of transition work out well. So such an important part of what's going on in this country now. So thanks so much for all that you've done, Callie, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Tony. And as Dr. Carson was talking, I was thinking about his speech at Charlie Kirk's memorial and what to me was the real message that Dr. Carson hit on so eloquently, and what almost every speaker hit on, which is that you didn't have much talk at that memorial about, specific policy priorities we need to pass, about, a specific reimbursement rate in healthcare, or, a specific subsidy that needs to be changed. What Dr. Carson hit on, and I think what was the theme of the event, is that we are unleashing a much deeper cultural, much deeper spiritual conversation in this country. And I think, as Dr. Carson has so eloquently said over so many years and just now, and I think it really speaks to the administration's commitment to this issue and to unleashing this conversation with him on board now. The policy changes are important, and what Dr. Oz talked about, getting prices down, is vital. And there's more momentum and more wins on the policy level than we've seen this year than in modern American political history. But I think what everyone feels, and what I certainly feel, having a view into what's happening in the White House, is that President Trump has marshaled a knowingly messy conversation and has marshaled the entire government to have it. Dr. Carson's going to be working throughout the government, but is working closely with Brooke Rollins, and what the USDA has done, to take on special interests with the SNAP waivers, to signal a stake in the ground on soil health and to disincentivize ultra processed food for kids. And a host of other issues. These are not things that the USD would have ever done or touched. It's certainly not things the HHS would ever do or touched. I mean, if you're looking for mass radical change all at once, you should not be looking at the federal government. That's not going to happen. But what we think, and I think the entire administration is aligned on, is we have a generational opportunity to push for dramatic policy change, which is happening. But I think the biggest thing that we all know is that this policy change is really just a tool to unleash wider conversations about the foundational cultural issues in America. And what makes me proudest, and I think what's happening in this country, is people are asking more questions of their doctor. People aren't taking the just generic nutrition advice. They're looking and doing their own research. They're thinking harder about what they're feeding their kids. The Wall Street Journal reported that snacking in the past year has gone down 7%. The market is changing. And I found it pretty inspiring. Earlier this week, or yesterday, I was with 400 large agriculture CEOs and food company CEOs, the people that we're going to battle with. I do think it's vital and inspiring that this administration is calling all stakeholders to the table, and we have to have direct Charlie Kirk style dialogue with all stakeholders, because if we don't have that dialogue, as Charlie Kirk has said, much worse things happen. But I did find it inspiring that, and they meant this sincerely, every single board meeting in America, for every single pharmaceutical company, for every single agriculture company, for every single food company, is dictated by the cultural force that's being driven out of this movement. And every single person in their heads, even if they say to a pollster they don't like MAHA, they know we're right. They know we're right about the fact that we have deep incentive problems where 70% of US children are eating ultra processed food, but only, 70% of a child's diet is ultra processed food, but that's only 10% in France and Spain. They know that's a problem. They know it's a problem that SSRI and psychiatric drug prescriptions among girls has gone up 10x in 10 years. And that the medical authorities say that's normal. They know it's a problem, that instead of talking about sunlight and exercise and healthy food for kids, our medical authorities, many of the health organizations are saying that we should be jabbing 6-year-olds with Ozempic. Like everyone knows there's an unsustainable problem. They see the cultural, the market forces and the political forces that are upset about this. And there is change and discussions happening at food companies. And to Vani's point, and that, to me, this is my primary goal, is this momentum has to keep going, the political and cultural momentum, because I think we're going to get continued policy wins, but it's this cultural conversation happening. A couple just quick updates, from what I'm seeing, just more brass tacks. I think this government shutdown is really interesting and speaks to how the MAHA movement's changed politics. The stated reason for Democrats closing the government is that we're not spending enough on healthcare. It's that this temporary, COVID era subsidy isn't continuing. The foundational Democratic argument is that the only thing standing between Americans and better healthcare is more spending. That is insane. We spend 4 times more on average than Europe on healthcare per capita and live 7 years less than the Italians. What the MAHA movement and what we're doing is fostering a much longer term and messier conversation, but vital conversation about why the healthcare system is broken, about the actual foundations and incentives of our culture and our healthcare system. And I do think that's a very winning message, and the Democrats are totally lost. We do not need to spend more money on healthcare. That's putting more gasoline into a fire that's already, gobbling things up and doing very poorly. The problem with healthcare is not that we don't spend enough. I think that's a very important point the MAHA has gone through, and it's changing American politics. The other thing I'll just mention, I'm here in Utah right now with 15 state leaders. This past year, we had 30 states pass MAHA bills. I'd encourage everyone on this call, if you're wondering what to do, get involved with local and state politics. These bills give such momentum to the federal government and to what we're trying to do. With the SNAP waivers to take soda and candy off of SNAP, 30 states. The bill in the Senate right now, the federal legislature, the Senate, has no co-sponsors do the same thing. So think about that. A bill in the Senate has no co-sponsors to take soda and candy off of SNAP, but 30 states have done it. So there's something really powerful happening in the states, and the more things can happen in the states on medical freedom, on recess. Many states have less than 20 minutes of recess a day, 20 minutes. There's bills on recess. There's bills on medical freedom. There's bills on teaching kids better nutrition. There's bills on mandating nutrition in medical schools. There's bills on cell phones in schools, bills to cut over prescriptions, bills on better food label transparency. There's a group of people and state leaders that are conspiring right now to unleash positive, unimpeachable MAHA bills. And I'd encourage everyone to track those and get active, go testify, because the more bills pass, it helps people. These are helping get better food at schools, helping get cell phones out of schools, helping with medical freedom, but also it really gives the federal government more momentum. So those are a couple quick updates from my side, and just so grateful, for what's happening and everyone on this call.
Thanks so much, Callie. I want to point out that we have 5,200 people have logged on to this call so far. So that's the most that we've had. And then we follow up with a call, and we ask all of those people to post assets that we send them. So we think that our reach can really be in the 100 to 200 million follower range, and that these calls really get to the whole country and kind of counteract the New York Times and so many other mainstream newspapers who just don't cover any of these incredible things that Callie talked about, that Vani talked about, that Dr. Carson talked about, that there's really just incredible work being done, that we have a MAHA president who's really made it clear, and it couldn't have been more strongly made clear than over the last couple of weeks, that President Trump is right behind the MAHA movement, that he wants it to be in every aspect of his government, that he wants it to be part of his legacy to the American people and to his own family. And so what we're getting now, which we've never had before, is real science, real, gold standard science. That's what we're looking for. That's what we're heading towards. And we've had a generation of increasingly fake science. And by fake science, I mean science that's meant to support the companies that that the government should be regulating, and that it's science that bought and paid for by the people who benefit from the outcome of that science, where they know what that science is going to show before they engage in the scientific research. So, one of the people who will definitely benefit, and so many people will benefit from the work that she's doing, is somebody who suffered because of lack of transparency in our government, and lack of gold standard science, and that is Brianne Dressen. She's the co-founder of React 19. She was injured in a COVID vaccine clinical trial as a participant. She since used her voice as a whistleblower to share her story, to warn other people, has written a book called Worth a Shot, has been involved in a film called Follow the Silence, and has just been out there fighting day and night to make sure that other people don't have to suffer in the ways that she suffered. So thanks so much, Brianne, for all that you've been doing.
Thanks for having me. So I just wanted to start out with, expressing my deepest gratitude to Dr. Carson and Dr. Malhotra, Callie Means, and of course, Tony, for being such a supporter. We are unfortunately a not so rare group that have been harmed after COVID vaccination. Our organization currently has 36,000 people that have been harmed by the COVID vaccines. That's just in the United States. We partner with over 20 other organizations globally that have all been started by people that have been harmed by the COVID vaccines, advocating for people that have been harmed by the COVID vaccines. Unfortunately, like Tony alluded to, I was injured in the clinical trials in the United States. My data was not disclosed appropriately in the clinical trial report. The NIH investigated my case. They investigated several other people as well. I was diagnosed with post-vaccine neuropathy from the NIH. So when people ask me, how do you know what happened? I just have to say, well, the NIH diagnosed me with post-vaccine neuropathy, so they can decide for themselves what they want to do with that information. I wanted to start with sharing a little clip of a few people that have had experiences like mine from their COVID vaccines. So if we can play that, that would be.
I was in good health, and the only thing that I did between good health and how I am now is take a shot.
I was a nurse. I didn't know. And that's painful.
When I was 18, I got the Johnson & Johnson COVID vaccine.
We got an email from work saying all employees need to be vaccinated.
I had to get the shot to do a swim meet and swim in a certain pool. My teammates had said, like, yeah, you won't be able to swim wherever if you don't get the shot. This is going to be a requirement ongoing, so you might as well just do it now.
They started sending out emails. This is the best thing that you can do. Protect your patients. So I got the Pfizer injection because I wanted to ensure that my family would be taken care of.
I had side effects. The doctor told me that they were completely normal. And then about a week after that, I ended up having a seizure and went to the hospital. I ended up having 4 strokes and was in a medically induced coma.
Over the next 4 days, I went from being healthy to my spinal cord, C3 through C7, had been attacked. And I was so sick.
I went to the hospital and I told them. And all the tests that they did on me, everything come back negative. So I wasn't the problem, but they had injected the problem into me.
So the Care Fund was super helpful for me in that I could try different treatments. I could pay for certain medications or just the copay at doctor's visits. So it took a lot of stress off my healing process.
The reason that I was able to come here today is because of React. The organization helps the emotional side of it, the connection side of it, the research side of it, policy. Those are the things that are going to give us purpose. That aspect of it helps more people than what React will ever know.
If you're struggling with vaccine, injury, medical costs like I was,
React 19's Care Fund might be able to help. Don't struggle alone.
Visit react19.org/care to apply for financial assistance.
So that's just a few of our membership, just trying to share their stories. It's perfect timing for this conversation to happen because today is October 1st. It's the beginning of Vaccine Injury Awareness Month. This is not just specific to COVID vaccines. This is for all vaccines. Anyone that has been harmed by a vaccine deserves to be heard. They deserve to be recognized, and they need to be helped. Unfortunately, the United States government has done a terrible job at addressing the harms, not just recognizing them and counting the numbers, but literally providing financial support through the VICP or the CICP programs, as well as medical care. Right now, through our organization, we have over 600 providers on our provider network. Unfortunately, I can count 10 that are able to help us get more integrative type medications that we need. For example, Danny, who was in the video, she was a healthy mom living her best life, and she got injured, ended up with a severe injury that she struggled with through trying everything, natural means, healthy lifestyle, and nothing was working, to the point where her doctors literally put her on palliative care. And that was in November of 24. And that's when she thought that she had reached the end of the road. This is someone who has 2 young kids, and the medical system had failed her, not only just because of the vaccine injury, but because they couldn't care for her adequately after her injury. So at React 19, we were able to help her get to a doctor in a totally different state and help her with the Care Fund, which is our medical grant program, where we help people with financial expenses, out-of-pocket medical expenses. Because of this, she went from, sorry, this is the end of the road, prepare for the end, to being able to take charge of a little bit of her life and be an active part of her children's lives again. These are the types of messages of hope that the vaccine injured need to hear. Everyone's been dancing around this issue. It's the elephant in the room. These people have been waiting for years for some kind of recognition, and now is the time for people to start talking about it. When people hear the word vaccine injury, they think it's an emotional, like they have an emotional response when it shouldn't be. It's just a medical condition. And you can hear my throat's spasming a little bit. So at React 19, we've awarded $1.3 million to date for people that have been in need for support for medical expenses. Every single dollar that people donate goes into this fund. The reason being is because the federal government's compensation program is a complete failure. We've awarded them more than double. And as you guys can see, people aren't talking about it on the Hill. They're not talking about it within the walls of behind the scenes. And so now is the time for us to start talking about it. But with that, I guess I can just tell you a little bit of the policy things we're pushing on. We are pushing on compensation reform. It's sorely needed. We also are pushing for better diagnosis codes. Right now, there is one T80 code, and it's very general, and it's for a minor reaction to a vaccine. While we've been pushing for diagnosis codes to be adjudicated here in the United States, Germany has done this, and they've been able to identify adverse events to vaccines more appropriately, and they've been able to get their people a little bit better care. But the fact that the United States has been completely adamant that they can't do diagnosis codes, while literally at the same time, they have instituted vaccine hesitant diagnosis codes that now can go into your medical record. They also have a really good comprehensive list of long COVID diagnosis codes. So we know that the medical system can help chronic conditions as long as they're politically convenient. And so now is the time for us to get rid of the politics. This is not a political illness. This is a medical condition. And it's okay for people to say vaccine injury. It doesn't have to be some big, scary topic. We can be humans and we can help each other, and we can start today. So thanks, Tony.
Thanks so much. And, it's such a good point because, since 1986, there's been this kind of myth that there's something magical about vaccines. And, people lose track of the fact that in 1986, the vaccine companies themselves went to Washington and they made the argument that their products were unavoidably unsafe. And that because of that, because, they at least claimed that the benefits far outweighed the harms, that they needed to get liability protection, and that liability protection would then help people get these products that they really needed. But as soon as they got that liability protection, you saw this incredible expansion in the number of vaccines. So we went from something like 7 viruses that we were vaccinating for, just through the roof, so that kids, by the time they're 18 now, get 73 to 92 vaccines for all kinds of things. And these products haven't been well tested. And the reason that they're not well tested is primarily because there's no liability. So companies that have liability for their products take more care. We've seen that for decades. We know that that's true with anything from food to pesticides, vaccines, drugs. You cannot give these companies just free rein to just focus on making as much money as they possibly can. So we need a government, and finally we have one, that is run by people like President Trump, like Secretary Kennedy, who are not focused on making more money, who are not focused on becoming more famous, who are not focused on becoming more powerful. They're actually focused on helping the American people and ending the chronic disease epidemic. And, we can have healthier products in all areas. We have great science in this country. We have great researchers. We have a great innovative spirit. And I think we can use that to give people personalized medicine, to give people better products, and to improve the health of everybody in this country. So one person who's really been great at personalized medicine and has really looked at the inside of how healthcare works and how the one-size-fits-all view of healthcare just doesn't work, doesn't improve anybody's health, and really needs to end, is Brigham Bueller. He's a healthcare entrepreneur, has been an insider who spent years navigating the corrupt system of insurers, PBMs, and regulators, and has seen firsthand how this healthcare system that we've had in the past profits off all of us being sick, not off all of us being healthy, not off prevention, but of just making people sicker and sicker and selling them products to keep them at some level of sickness. So, he's been fighting for radical transparency. He founded Ways to Well, Revive, RX. He's built a model focused on prevention, transparency, and patient empowerment. And he's really exposing the failures of the system and showing that it's possible that we can fix this system. And that's what we're all trying to do. That's why we're here. That's why we have this call. And that's why we're so proud to have a president like Donald Trump and a health secretary like Kennedy to really fight for us. So thanks so much, Brigham, for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I know we've covered a lot of ground, so I'll try and be brief, be bold, be gone, is what they said when I was a drug rep. And one of the things I learned owning pharmacies and labs is the power of the insurance conglomerates. Last week I hopped on and I talked a little bit about Big Pharma and the pressure it's putting on the FDA to obstruct and prevent accessibility to telemedicine, to compounded medications. And that's alive and well. And thank God for Secretary Kennedy and the Trump administration for fighting that and helping, put light on that issue. But one of the other issues that I saw was the insurance companies and the fact that their incentives are aligned to the sick care system, unfortunately. A lot of folks don't realize, but the middlemen that President Trump and Secretary Kennedy have alluded to, the pharmacy benefit managers, aren't actually middlemen. They were acquired in the 90s by the big by the big insurance corporations and conglomerates. So United, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield. As crazy as this sounds, they own the middlemen that negotiate the pricing for us, the American consumer and patient. And the problem with that is rather than negotiating down the cost of prescription drug care, which has been such a hot button topic, they began to negotiate up the cost of prescription drug care. And so many people go, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would the insurance companies want the drugs to be more expensive? 30% of United Healthcare, Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, all of these insurance companies' revenue is coming from monetizing your prescription drug care, meaning they have changed their incentives to preventing and stopping chronic disease and helping patients manage their health to instead profiteering and monetizing your chronic disease. So when you wonder why the average American is on 4 or more prescription drugs, why would we not stop somebody from being diabetic? We know that you're pre-diabetic. We have all the signs and all the tools in our tool belt to stop the progression of diabetes. But there's a lot more money in treating a diabetic than preventing you from becoming a diabetic. And you see it time and time again, even with the opioid crisis. This isn't me telling you this. This is Senate hearings and investigations at the governmental level that uncovered roughly 30% of all of the dollars spent on opioids stayed with the insurance companies, meaning the insurance companies themselves profiteered as much as the big pharmaceutical cartels off of patients being on prescription drugs. And so if we truly want to fix our healthcare system and provide preventative, predictive medicine for the masses, it starts with overhauling not just our pharmaceutical companies and our healthcare systems, but also the insurance companies that control those systems. And I think that this administration is focused on all of these items. That's actually how I met Secretary Kennedy, was him reaching out after hearing me on Rogan and saying, hey, do you want to come sit down and explain what you saw with the PBMs? And I'll make it quick and I'll wrap it up. But one of the main things I saw owning a pharmacy was your grandma or grandpa or loved one would come in and we couldn't fill the prescription that the doctor prescribed. Instead of giving the prescription that was best for the patient, we were forced to give the prescription that had the highest reimbursement rate for the insurance carrier. And the insurance companies themselves dictated what medications patients could get accessibility to. And it was catastrophic, and it continues to be a major problem here. And thankfully, this administration is aware of it. They're in discussions about it, and they're looking to fix this. This is on a long list of items that we're going to have to overhaul if we're going to fix this healthcare system. But I know we've burned a lot of time, so I don't want to spend too much more on that. Just thank you, everyone, for listening, and thank you, Tony, for the introduction.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on last week, this week, and for all that you've been doing. Really helpful stuff. This is the end of a one-size-fits-all view of healthcare, and you have been and continue to be right at the center of that. So there are 3 last things that I'd like to bring up, and one of them is that I really want people to get excited about the midterms. We have to have President Trump's back. We have to have Secretary Kennedy's back. We know what can happen if this revolution doesn't succeed. We know this is an existential moment. And, whatever you believe, whatever your background is on the right, on the left, any political views, this moment is just so important. And I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. We have to learn to love our children more than we hate each other. And we really have to get together and recognize that we're not going to let this system that's built up over all these years, this corrupt system that has led us to be the sickest people on the planet. We can't go back to that. We've seen what's happening. We know how the world works, and we're not going to let that happen. And so a big part of that is going to be fighting to make sure that we get the right outcome in the midterm so that Secretary Kennedy and President Trump can do what they've set out to do, which is end the chronic disease epidemic in this country and make America healthy again. So that's one. The other thing that I would really like all of you to do is read the MAHA report on Substack. It's been growing, but we really want people to read those stories. We're doing a lot of really great journalism. So please find that, read it, repost it. And then the last thing is that after every call, we're going to send out a really comprehensive email that has assets from all the people who are on it, has clips from this call, that you can repost. And we really want people to repost that because, you know, and some of the people on this call are mainstream media, but we've seen time and time again the smear campaigns, the hit pieces, the vilification of people like Brianne who have suffered. You know, I mean, nothing could be lower than that. And so we have to fight back, and we want to really tell this story, and we can do it now. We have a lot of power, and the people listening on this call have just incredible power. You know, 5,000 or 6,000 people reposting something, people who have big followings. You know, this is, like I said before, 100 to 200 million followers. So let's get this story out there. Let's make America healthy again, and let's take back our country and make sure that we never go back to the corruption that we've had in the past. Thanks so much, and I look forward to seeing you all next time.
We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution. We will not comply with the institution's sick illusion. No, it won't be televised. Welcome to the revolution.
The only thing that will save our country is if we choose to love our kids more than we hate each other.